Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the launch of the 8th edition of the CEBRI Journal, whose title is about the G20 in Brazil. My name is Feliciano Guimarães. I'm the Academic Director of CEBRI and also Professor of International Relations at University of São Paulo. It's a pleasure to have you all here for this launching event of this that discusses one of the issues that is probably going to be the most important issue in Brazil's international relations for 2024. As you all know, Brazil is hosting the G20 this year, and also under the G20, Brazil is hosting a number of engagement groups and meetings throughout 2024. So this edition obviously is based on what's the prospects, the opportunities, and challenges that Brazil will face this year in 2024. We put together 13 articles on the issue of the G20 alone. We had a number of submissions throughout this last 3 months on the issue of the G20. We felt from the beginning that that was a very important and a lot of interest from the Brazilian audience and abroad on the G20. So it has been a challenge to review and to put together all these articles to publish for this edition. So I thank all the authors, those who submitted and those who were invitees to present their papers for this edition. CEBRI Journal, this is our 8th edition, so we finished our 2nd year. I've been the editor-in-chief for the last 2 years, so I thank all the support that we have received from CEBRI, but also our sponsors, the companies Klabin and Brookfield, throughout these 2 years that made possible what is today probably Brazil's #1 policy-oriented journal in international relations. I also would like to thank the CEBRI team of the journal, especially our editor assistant Bruno Zilli and his co-worker Victoria do Lago, but also Mariana Jaguaribe, who designed this beautiful cover of this edition. This edition is already online. I forgot to say that it's a free for download to all articles. But if you want, you can also subscribe and receive the edition at home. I have here with me the last edition, the one before this one. So it's here. You can receive also this at home. This edition, the 8th edition, is much bigger than this one because putting together all this article plus 2 interviews is more than 250 pages. So it's a very long edition. And I also would like to thank Mariana Albuquerque, who is a new editor working with me, and editor-in-chief Hussein Kalut. Mariana Albuquerque worked for many years in CEBRI. Now she's a professor at the Federal University of Rio. She's a specialist on G20, and she wrote the editorial for this edition. So yeah, we have here with us a number of panelists, and we're very privileged to have them. First, we have Ambassador Márcia Loureiro, who is the current president of FUNAG, Alexandre Guzmão Foundation. FUNAG is one of the fellow institutions that is organizing the T20 in Brazil with CEBRI, and also IPEA, the other fellow institution that is organizing the T20. We have also Cíntia Feitosa Chaves, which is a specialist in international strategy at ICS, that stands for Instituto Clima e Sociedade, Society and Climate Institute. Is one of Brazil's leading think tanks on the issue of climate change, a very important partner of CEBRI in many initiatives. We also have Professor Andrew Cooper, who's a reference for us from international relations, studied middle powers and a specialist in also in Brazil's foreign policy in a way. He wrote extensively about that. Professor of political science at the University of Waterloo and associate senior fellow at the Center for Global Cooperation Research. And we have also Tatsushi Sonobe, who is the dean and CEO of the Asian Development Bank Institute, and Nicolas Bouchot, senior advisor at the Asian Development Bank Institute as well. Each one of the presenters will present their paper 10 minutes. At the end, I can come back with a couple of Q&A. This is the recording session. You can watch here with us on Zoom, but also is broadcasted in our YouTube channel. As I said, we have 13 articles published. We have the article by Ambassador Márcia Loureiro, that reviews what's going to be the role of civil society in multilateral negotiations process during the G20. We have a special article by Lucas Vosgrau Padilha, coordinator of international relations for the city of Rio and leader of the Rio 20 committee, talking about the role of cities on the G20. And I'd like to thank the City Hall of Rio for supporting CEBRI and the G20. The City Hall of Rio have nominated themselves the capital of the G20 Brasil, and we cannot agree more with that, as Rio is going to be a very important city, hosting many meetings throughout this year. We have also Professor Andrews Cooper article discussing the potential obstacles and opportunities for Brazil. Article by Dean Sanobi and Nicholas Bouchot suggesting a possible solution to expand the participation of institutions dedicated of being solution brokers, the think tanks and the role of think tanks in the G20 process. Article by Kanika Hakra about discussing in detail, analyzing in detail India's president, the last presidency of the G20. Article by Maria Neto, Luca Rizzo, and Cynthia Feitosa, who is here with us, proposing a roadmap for Brazilian presidency on the issue of sustainable finance. An article by Michael Jacobs on the challenge of adapting the Bretton Woods financial system to new demand international financing related to the G20. An article by Mike Liu talking about the development, the role of emerging countries in international negotiations of the G20. An article with many authors by idols from Germany advancing the issues of connecting climate change and global issues, led by Alder Meyer, is a #1 article. Another article by Sachin Chaturvedi from India, focus on the issue of sustainability and development related to G20. And finally, an article by Anna Katarina Hodrich and Axel Berger from idols, question the relevance of using the North and South categories in diplomacy. And just to finalize my presentation, two very interesting interviews, one with Amina Mohammed, who is the current Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, Chair of the United Nations Sustainable Development Group, and former Minister of Environment of the Republic of Nigeria, talking about the G20 and how Brazil can advance its agenda. And finally, an interview with Samir Saran, President of the Indian think tank Observer Researcher Foundation, the organizer, ORF, the organizer of the G20 in India. So thank you again. And now I pass the floor to Ambassador Marcia Loureiro. Ambassador Marcia, thank you again for being here. You have the floor.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Let me begin by congratulating CEBRI and particularly you, Feliciano, and Hussein Kalut for the launching of this issue of the CEBRI Journal on G20 Brazil. I think you've been able to gather an impressive, really, group of experts on the history of G20 and on issues currently at stake within the group. We will certainly learn a lot and gain new perspectives by listening to them and by reading the articles. I actually wish to congratulate you not only on this 8th issue, but on the CEBRI Journal as a whole. The periodical is today a very important tool for CEBRI as an independent think tank. As you just mentioned, Feliciano, I am with the Alexandre de Guzmão Foundation. FUNAG is a research institution affiliated with the Brazilian Ministry of Foreign Affairs that was created 50 plus years ago at a time when the field of international relations in Brazil was very limited. Back then, there were very few international relations departments at Brazilian universities, few experts, few, if any, specialized publications. The foundation was almost alone for quite some time and played a very important role in promoting, stimulating research in this field. And I'm happy to say that today the national scene is quite different. Foreign affairs are very much in the eye of public opinion and occupy their own place in the national debate. And CEBRI stands out as a well-known and a well-respected player within this national scene. So it was a pleasure to contribute an article to the current issue of the journal although I'm by no means an expert on the G20 history and on its inner workings. Actually, what I sought to do was to offer an introductory overview of the role of non-state actors in the G20, an overview which I thought might be useful to a broader audience, an audience not too familiar with the G20 or with the opportunities for social actors to participate in the process and to influence the outcomes. And we know that one of the problems within G20 is the preservation and the systematization of its memory, how the content generated over successive presidencies can become more easily accessible to the public. I myself encountered this difficulty in my own readings as I was preparing to join the G20 Brasil National Organizing Committee. So, based on my own experience, my goal for my article was no more than this, to offer to a non-specialized audience an outline of how non-state actors are being progressively incorporated through the various engagement groups into the G20 structure and into its policymaking processes. And in addition to that, I tried to raise also briefly some issues that still impact the effective participation and influence of those non-state actors. One of these issues is precisely what I just referred to, the management of the accumulated knowledge. We are aware, for instance, of the temporary nature of some official websites, and this is something that affects transparency and accountability. Another issue is the rotating nature of the presidencies and the sort of tension, if we may say, between the low level of institutionalization on the one hand, and on the other, the desirability of preserving some space, some flexibility for each national presidency to conduct its work and to innovate if they want to. And then there is the ever-present problem of how to adequately finance civil society participation with its obvious impacts that need no further elaboration. Plus there is also the issue of performance assessment, in other words, the expectation of non-state actors about the creation of formal mechanisms for monitoring the implementation of the official agreements, the official commitments. Another aspect that is frequently mentioned is the need to avoid an excessive predominance of certain countries or certain groups of countries in setting the agenda, in drafting the policy proposals, and so on. Often mentioned also is the need to improve the alignment, the consistency between the G20 agenda and the agenda of other multilateral fora, especially in the UN system. And ultimately the concern, the overarching concern that participation may not necessarily lead to actual influence on decisions and on the policy making. I believe all these issues require attention if we collectively expect an improvement in the interplay between governments and society, and they will certainly merit our careful consideration during the Brazilian presidency. By the way, I do think the Brazilian presidency looks very promising in the sense that state actors have repeatedly expressed their willingness, their desire to hear the voice of non-state actors and to receive their contributions. An example of this disposition on the part of the Brazilian presidency is the G20 Social, this new umbrella concept. And I am confident that the Brazilian presidency has the potential to set a new, a higher standard in terms of social participation and actual influence. As for us in the G20 Brazil Organizing Committee, we will try as best we can to do our part. So these were some of my thoughts that I wanted to share with you. And with this, I conclude, Feliciano, by again thanking CEBRI for the invitation and for creating for us this important space for discussion. Many thanks.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Marcelo Loureiro. It's a pleasure to have your article, and you gave a very good presentation and summarizing the main aspects of the article. And I would just like to emphasize as well how important is going to be this G20 social aspect that we want to sort of inaugurate here. No, I'm not sure if inaugurate, but at least emphasize in Brazil's presence. So thank you again for being here. Now I pass the floor to Professor Andrew Cooper. Professor, you have the floor. Thank you again for being here.
A pleasure, Feliciano, and your team. I mean, this is a very impressive achievement, not only in the beauty of the product that I've just seen online, but also, of course, the timeline of having it out. I mean, this gives you a great advantage, CEBRI, a great advantage, you know, well before the summit. This isn't 2 weeks before, even a month before. I mean, so the audience, I know a lot of the audience is tuning in now, but I think the audience will tune in over a span of time and really give huge advantage and comparative advantage to this excellent 13 articles. I'm neither Brazilian nor am I a kind of a specialist in sort of the technical domains of the G20, but I have been a long time watcher. I went to the first G20 in Washington, D.C. many years ago. So I think what I'd like to do in my 10 minutes is just quickly go through sort of the 3 themes, you know, in general terms, and then maybe play out how I see Brazil tapping into those themes or maybe being conflicted by those themes. One, and I think it's, you know, an obvious theme, but sometimes because of the inclusion of civil society and many of the T, B, C, 20s and everything else, we shouldn't overlook that this is a leaders' summit. And the change in the kind of nature of leaders, looking back at 2008, 2009, there was a dominant culture of sort of technocratic leadership. I think that has gone. I think we can talk about now charismatic, sort of personalistic leadership. And this makes the summit rewarding for leaders, but also risky for leaders. The second theme, and here, it's also obvious, but going back, it didn't look obvious, was the nature of the countries that wanted to grab the G20 and run with it. And here, Feliciano mentioned middle powers. I think it's quite clear to say that the kind of group of countries that can be categorized as middle powers were more assertive early on. South Korea, Republic of Korea, a very good example, Turkey, Australia, and so on. Now it's the global South and certainly the aspirational global South, Indonesia, India, Brazil, South Africa. And again, this is an important feature of global society and world politics that we wouldn't have expected prior to 2008. The third is the nature of the you know, what the G20 expects. When we look back to 2008, 2009, what it expected was a crisis committee, or even perhaps a steering committee, that there was a big financial crisis, global, started in the US and radiated out, very different from previous crises. Now we're not in the same position, but we've got a lot of crises, however you want to describe those crises. And here, I think whether we call the G20 a focal group or there's a management component that I think is extremely important to look out. There's not going to be one achievement in the G20 in Rio. It's going to be hopefully a variety of achievements. So running through Brazil, what do we see? Well, we have a very experienced leader, President Lula, if I can call him that. He's a long-standing, reputable member of the G20 culture going back to 2008. He missed Toronto G20. I think there were floods in Brazil, but again, there's lots of standing there, a lot of skill, lots of competence. And then when you throw the advisory team, the radiating out not only from state officials but to society, this at least has not more than potential. There's a level of sort of competence that we can really build into and hope for optimistic traction through the G20. The second sort of feature through sort of Brazilian lines is the Global South. Different from China and India, right? There's not that sort of rivalry for leadership of the Global South that goes back to Bandung, 1955. You don't see the complexity of that sort of relationship. I think the nature of sort of Global South leadership once more has risks and rewards. The risks are that perhaps there'll be overstretch. And here I have to say, I am worried about putting too many process objectives, particularly reform of formal IOs. I mean, this is a long-standing demand and aspiration, and I think it fits in with the just theme of the G20. But I think if we get away from the actual core functions of the G20 and what the G20 can achieve, there's going to be difficulties. And with that, maybe not to BRICize the G20. I mean, Brazil will have its turn, and again, BRICS is a very important, very illustrative institution that shows the kind of concertation, as I term it, of Global South countries. But that can wait. I mean, we see Brazil not wanting to chair or host or have the presidency of both of those institutions in the same year. So again, G20 focus this year. And finally, the management function, and probably the most difficult, because the management function will be seen at both the state and the societal level. We can see the managerial function at one level being to make sure that the right leaders turn up and maybe the wrong leader doesn't turn up, or if the wrong leader turns up, that it's very, very crafted in a way that other leaders and countries will turn up as well. So this is going to be a very delicate balance. And here, and again, I will defer to others, is the societal aspect. What we've seen in the past, and I think this is going to be probably one of the great achievements of Brazil, is that we see society, despite the movement into an inclusionary culture, is that in many ways, the people on the street have either a stigmatization or just a lack of information and knowledge about the G20. I think Brazil will be different. And I think there's going to be, and I think CEBRI and other institutions, think tanks is going to play a big role like this. So to finish, we can see that there's a lot of other big moments in Brazil's life in terms of summitry, Rio, environmental conference back in '92, on all sorts of other Olympics and FIFA and so on. But this is different. The stakes are high, the visibility is high, the skill set is going to be necessity high, and there it's a test. And I think Brazil will do a very good job, but it is going to be a test. We'll see a lot of sort of moments where the competence, the skill, the sort of personality nature is going to have to really come to the forefront. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Andrew Cooper. Well, that was a very good summary of the article. I think you put very wisely these state and societal challenges for Brazil. I think we see that in all the engagement groups. One of the goals of the T20, the Think 2020, but also the B20, the C20, the W20, the S20 is to engage more Brazilian society in general. We went to capacitate, to improve the quality of our international participations. And I think it's an opportunity for Brazil society and our NGOs and think tank environment to improve, to get better, and to be more internationalized. I think this is a great opportunity, but also is a challenge. And you put correctly on the challenge of overstretching in the agenda. I think the Brazilian government has a very, they know they can do more with less. I think that's their goal. They want to do like a narrow agenda if possible to have more achievable goals at the end of the summit. So let's see, this is going to be a very challenging year. On the issue of having very capacitated and intelligent NGO participation in the G20, we have here a very good special example of that, which is Ms. Cynthia Feitosa from the ICS. So Cynthia, thank you very much for being here with us. You have the floor.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Feliciano, and thank you, CEBRI, for the invitation. It's a great pleasure for X to be part of this edition. We are very good partners of CEBRI, I hope. So, because CEBRI is a good partner of ours. So, and I'm so happy to hear other colleagues talking about the role of civil society, since X exists to promote the role of civil society that work on climate. I am here with the big challenge of representing our trio of authors of this article, our Executive Director, Maria Neto, our specialist in climate finance at X, Luca Rizzo, and myself, Cynthia Feitosa, specialist in our international strategy. First of all, I don't need to say again how timely is this edition of the journal around G20, but not only because of the Brazilian presidency, but in a time, as we heard, that it's very difficult to get consensus in the international community. We have simultaneous crisis, security, poverty, wars, food security, and climate emergency, not to mention other topics, like as we saw in the World Economic Forum, such as jobs and AI and other environmental crises. So we decided to focus in our expertise, that is climate, but in a particular topic that is climate finance. We saw in the launch of the Brazilian presidency of G20, and even before in the India summit, President Lula is stating as big priority for the Brazilian leadership of the group, the combating climate change, including with a task force on climate change that is a totally new thing, as well as the G20 social, as Ambassador Marcelo Loureiro mentioned, but also two task forces that can be linked. We see that there are many benefits in linking these two task force on combating climate change and the other one that is combating poverty and hunger. And I need to mention that climate and G20 are like intrinsically linked, because G20 countries contribute to an average of 70% of all the greenhouse emissions in the world and account for 80% of global GDP. So, of course, G20 is seen as a fundamental space for the implementation of climate policies aligned with science and international treaties, and notably the Paris Agreement. The countries have also the challenge of responding to IPCC reports that state that we need to peak our emissions in 1 year from now. That's a challenge, and reduce emissions by 43% by 2030, related to the levels of 2019, so we can have the chance to achieve Paris Agreement. And this group of countries, although we know that we have very separate structure, like G20 is one thing, UN is another thing, and UNFCCC, that's the Convention on Climate, is another thing. But we have also a star alignment that make Brazil president of G20 this year, next year BRICS Plus, and also COP30 under the Convention on Climate. So we want it or not, it's already linked, and civil society is already making the connections with the opportunity for the country to show its commitment to the agenda, and also lead consensus, because things are not easier in the space of the Climate Convention under the UN. So one of the biggest challenges of the climate discussion is aligning finance flow accordingly to the size of the challenge. So that's not only reducing emissions, but also adapting to the already felt impacts of the changing climate. So it's very important It's a very important agenda to developing countries. And if we see Brazil as part of these 4 years in a row of developing countries leading G20, we have a special role regarding our presidency also of COP30 next year. So to quick, and let me just take a look in my time here, to quick present what we chose as the main topics for our article is mainly climate finance and how we need to use the G20 to align these finance flows accordingly to the needs not only of developing countries, but also aligning to the climate policies inside developed countries, so we can have the flow in a way that don't increase the crisis of debt, of external shocks to some countries. And the good news and some of our recommendations is that we don't need to reinvent the wheel in G20 in Brazil, as simple as that. So ambition doesn't necessarily mean the need to create new initiatives and new groups and new space, because we already have a lot, including civil society, as we were saying, the A to Z engagement groups that we have here in Brazil keen to participate. We have the opportunity to build on the agendas from the previous G20s, especially from India and Indonesia, and leave a legacy also to South Africa that will be the incoming presidency. And we need a pragmatic and feasible agenda on the climate finance topic, following already good outcomes that we had in the last 13 years. We have already mentioned to the climate agenda in the year that Lula didn't attend because of the extreme weather event here in Brazil in 2009. And in the paper, we mentioned some of these initiatives from previous editions and presidencies of G20 that should be monitored by the government, but also by the civil society and this expanded group of participants here in Brazil. We recommend also to align the Sherpa and the finance track, and it's not an easy task. But we need also to align the discussion on climate with other working groups and initiatives which can deliver bold climate commitments and roadmaps to action, not only the Sustainable Finance Working Group, that's a focus of our explanation in the paper, but also there are some groups such as reforming the international financial architecture, trade, or combating disasters and responding to disasters that are very linked to the climate agenda. And also there is a big opportunity to monitor, showcase, and discuss ongoing initiatives that are already linking the climate finance debate with matters of concern for developing countries, but also domestic policies that are already in course within developed countries and developing countries that could serve as an example. And G20, of course, is a very representative group, as I mentioned before. So even without these legally binding decisions and outcomes, it has a big impact in other international discussions and domestic policies. So it's also a key forum to promote the better integration of climate finance and climate change issues into the agenda of ministries of finance and central banks, and initiatives like the ecological transformation plans that are being launched by many countries, including Brazil. So we see G20 as a laboratory to explore that initiatives. And with this package, if I can tell this as a package, it's possible to accelerate the initiatives and the recommendations by other presidencies, by previous presidencies, and improve the access to funds by developing countries. And discussing this is part of the priorities that were launched by the presidency this week, I think. And also discuss some sectoral opportunities to these finance flows in the case of Brazil and many other developing countries. Energy transition in a fair way and just transitions, nature-based solutions, and the imperative to bolster climate finance, not only on mitigation, that is reducing emissions, but also adapting to the impacts. And last but not least, to repeat what was said before, Brazil has this unique, I would say, opportunity to improve the participation. So businesses, civil society, academia, other non-state actors, and also not only the Brazilian ones that are already in a fast pace of learning curve here, I would say, because it's not easy to engage in the G20, and it's not easy to give technical contributions, but we have a strong civil society, not only in Brazil, not only in developed countries, but in the global south, that can promote this task force that were launched by the Brazilian government and aligning them to the discussion on development much more than only saying that that is an environmental debate. And also, of course, to repeat, because I would like to emphasize this, the contribution of the engagement groups can be extremely rich, helpful, and have an impact on the deliverables by the government and this presidency in a more inclusive way, and also to align the tracks, the finance, the Sherpa tracks in the discussions, aligning what Brazil needs to deliver this year to have a meaningful presidency of COP30 next year, and BRICS Plus, because as Professor Andrew mentioned, Professor Cooper mentioned, it will be a test of the Brazilian leadership after many years without being much participative on the international space. And we do see that there is a link between climate finance and this combat to hunger and poverty. Thank you. I hope I am on time.
You are. So thank you very much, Cynthia. It was a very good presentation. As I said, ICS is a great partner with CEBRI. You're a great friend of ours, and thank you very much for the paper. I think you pointed out some very important challenges for Brazil. I really appreciate the discussion between the necessity to connect better the Sherpa track with the finance track and many working groups. And also we see that at the T20 and the B20. So people here in Brazil, but also from other countries, when they start to learn about the G20 process, that's one of the first questions that it's okay, there are the two tracks and how they work together, because they're discussing many times the same issues from a different perspective. And I think this is, and also the conversations we have with the Brazilian governments, they are very much aware of that. They know from the previous experience how difficult that is, and I think this is going to be important there. And also, as you said, Professor Andrew Cooper said as well, Brazil's challenge in organizing and leading 3 consecutive very important international forums, such as the G20, which is the biggest of them all, but also the BRIC Plus and the COP30 in Belém in the Amazon into next year. So the year after that. So thank you for your paper. Now, I pass the ball to 2 very good soccer players of the G20 and the G20 history, which is Dean Sanobi from the Asian Development Bank, and after that, Nicolas Bouchot from ADBI, Development Institute, for the great paper that we received from theirs. Thank you very much for being here with us. You have the floor, Dean Sanobi, you first, and then Nicolas after.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Feliciano. It's really nice to be connected with you, and also it's really a great pleasure and honor to be a part of this wonderful session. And Professor Ambassador Marcia, Professor Andrew, and Cynthia, very nice meeting to you. Thank you very much. And then I would like to start by congratulating CEBRI Journal for the launch of this 8th issue, and also congratulate Brazil for having successfully started G20 process as president of G20 2024. And congratulate CEBRI on being leading co-chair of T20 Brazil. So I was very happy when Feliciano gave me an email inviting ADBI to contribute a short piece to CEBRI Journal, and then I was very happy. And then I asked my advisor Nicolas Bouchot, who will speak after me, to join me to writing one piece. So Nicolas is actually kind of champion of T20. He's, according to Feliciano, the library of T20, and then, library or dictionary of T20, and he's absorbing a lot of knowledge and experiences of T20 and the other think tank global community. So he absorbed too much. Maybe that's the reason why he's has been projecting more and more, becoming physically big. So I'd like to give him more time to speak because he's been up. He's in Indonesia, and then it's before 5 a.m. So he had to keep himself up until now without sleeping. So I'd like to give him more time. So I like to focus on the issue of what is T20. So why the think tanks gather. So as you know, the T20 is one of engagement groups of G20. And then what is engagement group? Yeah, so every year, G20 organizers, the government, usually government official of the president country, organize or ask some groups to be official engagement groups. And the engagement groups, not only the T20, but also Women 20, Civil Society 20, Science, Labor, Business, and Youth, and some others. And then G20 every year has also the group called working groups. Working groups are a group of the policy makers. And then the engagement groups are groups of some other people, which I mentioned, just mentioned. And then why those engagement groups exist? So the reason from the perspective of the G20 organizers government, there are two reasons. One is they want, some groups to liven up or give a boost to G20 process. So popularize that and then let the public know more about the G20 is one reason. And then another motivation for the government to ask groups to be engagement group is to get a kind of idea of policy. So those policy makers know very details of the economies and society and global issues, but nonetheless, their kind of scope may be limited. So they want to get good ideas for making policy better from the other people. That's the engagement groups. So these two are the motivation from the government side. And then the reason or motivation from the think tanks point of view, I think there are multiple. And then I thought that there would be at least 4 reasons why think tanks across the world want to join this T20, the engagement group. And then now while listening to Ambassador Marcia and Professor Andrew and Cynthia, I learned that there is another one. So now I have at least 5 motivations for us think tanks to participate in T20, that's engagement group. So one is the first one, first 2 would be the closely related to the kind of reason of existence of think tanks in the world. Okay, so the think tanks usually have 2 purposes. So one is, well, actually there are different types of think tanks, but those think tanks which are focusing on helping policy making would have two kind of ideas. One is to bridge scientific research and policy making. That's one. And then another is to provide out-of-the-box thinking. So give policymakers kind of fresh idea. And then the bridging scientific research and policy making is, kind of nice phrase, but it's really difficult to do because policymakers are people who cannot wait, but scientific researchers are people who want to take longer time. So how to bridge this gap is a big issue. And then if each think tanks, start research after listening to the policymakers' demand for knowledge, it's too late. It will take 3 years, 5 years to provide the scientific research results. But if the think tanks can ask the other think tanks in the world and the university researchers, then they can get some good idea quickly. At least the think tanks be able to say to the policymakers that the world frontier of the science, frontier of the knowledge is here. So if you go further by making the new policy, then that's a gamble. So at least we can say this kind of thing very quickly. So the connecting with each other among the think tanks and the university researchers and other wise people would be very, very important for think tanks. So, and then the out-of-the-box thinking is different. It may not really be based on the scientific research, but government people definitely need such fresh ideas. But how to get the fresh ideas? Think tanks are not Superman, so they need some kind of inspiration. But talking with other think tanks in the world, we can get more inspiration, fresh kind of ideas and experiences in other countries. So this is very important source for out-of-the-box thinking. These two are very helpful for us think tankers to contribute to policy making. And the third is that many issues about policies which the government and the society have to make are now the global issues, like a pandemic, like climate change, and the global supply chain disruption. And then also the global kind of governance, important governance institutions to make economy function better, like a WTO, or in the case of health, WHO. Those multilateral organizations are kind of under pressure and also declining. So how to maintain those global institutions is also important global issues now. And then also likely, so multilateral financial institutions like World Bank, Inter-American Bank, and Asian Development Bank, which is my kind of parent company. How to maintain and strengthen the functioning of those multilateral financial institutions is also big global issues. So to talk about global issues, we need to learn what other countries are thinking and why they think in that way, particular way. So to get such knowledge and information, it's better for the think tanks to talk with each other across the world. And then fourth is the think tank community, global think tank community can be the last resort when the relationships among governments become very, difficult. So government and government may not speak each other, but think tanks can talk each other. And then through this connection, the government and the government can get the information and the communication. So this can be, I hope that such situation will not take place, but when it comes, then the think tanks or community in the world can provide one of the last resorts. I hope this is multiple last resorts. And then these four are the reasons why think tanks want to join. But lastly, I learned from the CEBRI's website and the CEBRI Journal's website. I learned the design is very nice. So think tanks can learn from each other. And then I heard from I listened to the Ambassador Marcia, and then top of the Funagi is the female, and then ADBI also have to expedite kind of movement toward the gender equality. So as a manager, as a CEO of a think tank, I learn a lot from this kind of engagement. So these are the reasons why the global think tank community is important for think tanks in each country. So sorry, Nicola, I spoke too much. So please, make a very nice conclusion for our contribution to CEBRI Journal.
Thank you, Dean Sonobe. Nicholas, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dean Sonobe. It's never so easy to speak after you, but maybe I would like to insist on a few factors, especially linked with some notions that you have brought up, which would be about how the work of think tanks in the G20 can contribute to strengthen the role for think tanks globally. So not just in the G20, but also globally. So what we did last year, no, in fact in 22, but it was edited last year. We tried to get an understanding of how the group of think tanks in the G20 evolved since it was created in 2012, right? And our book called A World in Crisis, A World in Progress tried to review a number of evolutions and transformations of the T20. And maybe one of the first and foremost lessons is that when from the outside you look at the T20 or at the G20 or at the different working groups, etc., it might look that it is institutionalized and it is running, and there are some institutions or people who are sort of running the show. In reality, things are much less consolidated than they look. That is, I think, an important lesson. A second, and Ambassador Marcia Loureiro mentioned that also in her opening note. Yes, it is true that every year the G20 is chaired by another country, even if there is the system of troikas, right, which ensures some level of continuity. But the institutional landscape would change quite significantly, whether it is like Japan, for example, in 2019 chairing the G20, or then Indonesia in 2022, or India, no, Brazil, and then South Africa. So there is, of course, a huge loss of institutional memory. That is very true, including within the engagement groups, including the think tanks, right? Because there is no central recording of the decisions. And that is a problem. But it is also very healthy in the conditions of today, in the sense that you cannot just build on what was undertaken even by your organization or institutions in the few months before. You have to understand that very quickly, if you want to continue think ahead, you need to find allies, and this will be very different allies. You need to open up. You need to be available to understand different sets of approaches and solutions. And in the context of sort of the global, not only financial crisis that was mentioned by Andrew Cooper, which is at the origin of the G20 or the global climate crisis, but also the global social crisis that you can see in different forms, right? Such as in Europe at the moment. We do need constantly to refresh our minds and mindsets and ideas. So this is why also we tried in our article to address this idea of think tanks, not just being like kind of observatories of the life of governments, but also as solutions brokers, together with other players. It was mentioned several times during our discussion here, other engagement groups or government groups. And my experience in the past few years, especially with issues like climate finance, sustainable finance, or infrastructure finance, is that the G20 is never as relevant and as interesting when there can be exchanges with, I would say, more institutional levels. And I remember, for example, during the G20 Italy, for the first time, there was a joint statement and also joint work from the T20, the B20, the group of businesses, which is also has been incorporated for a long time in the G20, and another group called D20, that is the club of long-term investors. And then also in close coordination with the group of ministers of finance, etc. And sometimes this is missing, this interaction between, in the context of the G20, which is not a research body, right? Which is really about policy making. If we forget this dimension, then we are both not contributing to enrich public policy making, but this is not also a service that is being done to think tanks. That is, I think, an important point. Then I would like to insist on another aspect linked to the very situation now within the G20 and more globally. Reason why also, we insisted on this commonality of interest of think tanks across different geopolitical spheres, as was made very clear by Dean Sonobe, is because we are confronted to intertwined challenges, and they are challenging each and every one think tank's own ability to get an understanding and to be a relevant place to incubate future policies. In the context of the G20, for example, we are not yet prepared to welcome, as we should, the African Union. So the novelty of last year is that the G20, by large consensus or complete consensus, has agreed that the African Union should becoming a new full member of the G20, right? However, when you look at the landscape of think tanks, for example, across the African continent and more globally, how think tanks can contribute to make this new entrance of the African Union a success, we are far from succeeding yet. So when it comes to such a challenge with such a magnitude, the rivalry or the competition that necessarily exists, right, between think tanks in a given geographic area or across geographic areas must be tamed down in favor of more collaborative or cooperative approaches. And here, I think the responsibility of the think tanks such as Funagi, CEBRI, and also IPEA, which are coordinating the work of the G20 Brazil, is huge. There needs to be some probably articulation with the good conclusions and whereabouts of the G20, T20 India. Also, it was different, but also think ahead. And I don't know, I don't remember who mentioned, I think it was Feliciano and Marcia also, and our colleague from ICS. I would say somehow the G20 of Brazil is poised to last not 12 months, but somehow 24, because there will be the G20 this year in 24, but then there is the social summit that Brazil, the president of Brazil wants to host, and then it is true that Brazil will host also an important COP30 in 25, and the BRICS Plus Summit also in 25. So somehow it's not just a question of observing or commenting how difficult or systematically complex things are, but getting hands-on and using the bandwidth of having think tanks from Japan, from the Indo-Pacific area, from China, from EU, from North America, from Latin America, from Central Asia, from Russia as well, because it is also part of the G20, and now from Africa, right? To get a sense of responsibility and somehow humble leadership. I think those dimensions are very important. And this comes, I would say, on top of running the show and make sure that everybody is happy and running task forces, etc. But let's not be mistaken. The task forces and the mobilizations of a vast variety of think tankers, as would Dean Sonobe said, across the globe, is a tool, is an instrument, is not the goal. And in this regard, I think the different dimensions of the G20 Brazil are very important, especially because, and this will be my last point, we are constantly struggling with the growing boundaries between or across geopolitical spheres, right? And that might be fine for governments, but we can see that the impacts on the functioning of international or multilateral institutions is significant and is not good, but also the impact on our collective ability to shape new knowledge is detrimental. So there is a real question that is being addressed, and it's not an easy one, right? For think tanks, especially in the open space of the G20, to constantly build bridges. And for instance, when we see that there is a BRICS and BRICS Innovation Forum and think tanks involved in BRICS, etc., are somewhat sometimes the same, which are in the G20, but which in the BRICS format, then they don't talk to the G7 format and so on. We don't need such boundaries in the think tanks environment. They exist, we cannot ignore them, but we must find overarching goals such as improving significant stakes for justice and climate finance and so on to overcome those boundaries, and even, if possible, to also work in a more scientific way towards the fabric of new ideas, of future ideas, of based upon scientific evidence. The very last element, sorry, Feliciano, I wanted to mention is the proposal that was issued last year as ADBI and Dean Sonobe was chairing the group of think tanks of the G7 Japan, but in very close coordination with the T20 India, right? We thought that expanding the space, the dialogue space, was very important, but also raising a new question for think tanks, also to be able to understand, not judge, but understand the impacts of the multiple decisions, commitments, and pledges that are made every year by any G20 presidency. And this has taken the form of the proposal, which is at still a very, very early stage of a G20, G7, BRICS, etc., but let's say G20 dashboard, whereby we could use the distributed power of think tanks across the globe all together, plus some computational capabilities to get a better sense of the impacts of G20 decisions and the impacts of the G20 programs, which sometimes are branded with a lot of communication during a given presidency. But when you look back even 2 or 3 years afterwards, nobody remembers what it was about. And this is not a loss of knowledge. This is a lot of energy, funding, money, and opportunities. So maybe this is a new direction also for think tanks, which also suppose that cooperation does prevail over competition and judging what is positive or negative in what others do.
Thank you, Nicolas. Thank you, Nicolas and Jean Sonoma, for your great presentations. I think you both gave a great overview of the role of think tanks in the process of the G20. I think the challenges that Nicolas put out in his remarks were very, very interesting. I think it's very important for us here at CEBRI, but also at Funagi with Ambassador Marcia and Bea, of these challenges, right? So I think on our side, I would comment only one point that it came to mind for us is how important it is to build alliances across the BRICS and G7 and the G20. Use the G20 as a forum in which we can try to build these bridges. I think maybe Brazil has a unique position in this environment in which we are a member of a BRICS, but also we're part of the West, so we are right in between. We don't have problems with anyone at BRICS. We don't have any problems with anyone at G7. So geopolitical problems don't necessarily affect Brazil and Brazil's capacity to engage. That's not to say that we can't be successful in building bridges in many issues, but I think it's a role that we can try to play. So if we narrow down to the issues that are truly global, that we can give a contribution. So this is our, for sure, biggest challenge in hosting the G20, the T20, and in Brazil, but also next year with the BRICS Plus and the COP30 in the Amazon. So thank you very much. It's already, and thank you again to both of you. Dean Sanobe is in Tokyo and Nicolas in Jakarta right now, so they're early in the morning. They are already in February. No, they're on 31st of January there. So they're not in February yet. But thank you again. Our time is up. We received a couple of questions, but I wonder if any of you wants to make a final comments on in any of the issues that we discussed here. Remembering that someone made a comment. This is still January. It's an endless month. I agree with you. We have between here and our YouTube channel 100 people online. So I'd like to also thank you everyone for being here. Ambassador Marcia, if you have the floor for your final remarks. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Feliciano. It's just to say how much I appreciate the opportunity to learn from experts that have been involved in following G20 and T20 for an extended period, especially your considerations, your ideas, colleagues Sonobe and Bichu, are extremely valuable to us at G20 Brazil as we try to build upon the initiatives of former presidencies. I'm sure Feliciano agrees with me, and that's all I wanted to express. My thanks.
Thank you, Ambassador Marcia. Professor Andrew, Dean Sonobe, Cynthia.
Yeah. No, it's been an exciting time in Brazil, and I think Brazil will pass the test, but there will be those moments where the Sherpas, the C's and the T's and the B's will know that this is a serious test, that they have to have competence, they have to have skills, and they have to have a sense, and I think you brought it out, Felicia, that they have to have a sense of global solutions, global reach in the G20. And this is really what differentiates. And it was probably, I should have brought this out earlier, that you're right. I mean, Brazil has the opportunity to be a bridge in this regard. I mean, the non-aligned mantra, I think, stands up well in this regard, that, it extends beyond the kind of old G77. I think we can see Brazil really playing a role that will be a good legacy for South Africa and other countries down the road in terms of the G20.
Thank you, Professor.
Yeah, Feliciano. So I wish you,
please.
Yeah, I wish you great successes in making CEBRI journal more popular and influential, and also making the G20 Brasil a really fruitful forum of discussions and collaboration.
Thank you, Dean Sonobe. Thank you very much. And ADBI is a great partner. It's a great and great to have you. Cynthia, you wanna your last remarks, and then I pass the last to Nicholas.
Yes, thank you again, and congratulations for this new edition. I see that there is already a fast learning curve in the civil society and other, including the government, I would say, on the participation and how to improve the participation and how to make the connections that we need for the topic of climate, but I imagine for others as well. And I hope that in 1 year, maybe we can discuss how it was in Brazil, how it's is building the bridge between G20 and this other forum, and also having a contribution to South Africa and their leadership from our learnings here in Brazil, not only for think tanks and the climate community, but also by the government itself. Thank you again.
Thank you, Cynthia. Thank you for being here. Nicholas, please.
Yes, thank you very much, and congratulations for launching this edition of the CEBRI Journal at a very timely moment. All articles deserve to be read very carefully, and they match. They are very complementary. So I think this is an excellent choice. Then I would have just to mention one thing probably is that while there will be the G20 Brazil for think tanks, there is another challenge, which is really to, there are two challenges, in fact, I would say. One is would be to continue building on this cross-border approach, cross geopolitical spheres approach that we have not only promoted, but tried to activate concretely in the past year, including by plugging in more the think tanks with the Sherpas and with the finance track at I would say at a strategic level, right? That is the first point. The second point, when we look at how much, for example, the 2030 agenda is going backwards, right? Sometimes we can think, oh, all our inputs are useless, and the world is going in unwanted directions. This is, on the contrary, one more reason to work together in a stronger manner, but also to invite or to onboard new players constantly in the game. And the think tanks here have a special responsibility, because when we look, for example, at Africa, where there is a wealth of issues linked with the global south, but also a number of concerns, the learning curve and the need to support partners, well-known established think tanks and others, is huge, and that comes on top of all other priorities of the G20 Brazil. So I think we are here together to help each other. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nicholas. Thank you again. And thank you, everyone, for being here with us late at night here in Brazil. It's a pleasure. Just like to remind you that the 9th edition of this, which is going to be 2024's first edition, is about President Lula first year in office, the foreign policy of President Lula first year in office after 4 years of isolation during the Bolsonaro administration. We're back in the game. G20 is an example of that, and the responsibility that us as Brazilians have, not only to bring Brazil back, but the responsibility of building these bridges, of being pragmatic and trying to measure correctly our capacity to reach out and to bring these other countries together to issues that really matter. I think this is one of our biggest challenges. I always tell my students that being a developing country and a middle power at the same time is very challenging, because you never know if you have enough power to bring people together, and you never know if you're like punching below your weight, or if you are overstretching your capacity. So that's a very difficult measurement in our foreign policy. So I think Lula's administration faces that. Every single administration in Brazil has faced that in the past, and we continue to face. And every think tank in their international engagement faces the same problem. So this is always a challenge for us. So again, thank you very much, everyone, and hope to see you again in the next launches of CEBRI journals. Bye-bye. Good night and good morning for you guys there in Asia. Bye-bye.
Thank you.